All right, we have one more section of conversions to learn. These are a little bit more complex than what we did yesterday. So if you didn't understand yesterday, make sure you go back and understand yesterday before you try to do these, because we're going to take it a step up today. First of all, we're going to see what happens when we convert, when I can't use just a simple conversion factor. So here I'm going to try to convert 5 kilometers to centimeters. So just like I did before, I'm still going to take what they give me and I'm going to put it over 1, because that's always what I do. Now, here I'm trying to get rid of kilometers, but I don't know how many centimeters there are in a kilometer. I know that the unit is getting smaller, but I can't make that conversion directly. So I do know how many meters there are in a kilometer because I have that one memorized. I know that in 1 kilometer there are 1,000 meters, so I can cancel out my kilometers. Now I can convert meters to centimeters. I want meters on the bottom so that that will cancel out. And I know that in 1 meter there are 100 centimeters. So now my meters will cancel out as well. So that's going to convert me from kilometers to centimeters. So I'm going to take 5 times 1,000 times 100. So that is going to give me an answer of 500,000 centimeters. Okay? So obviously when you multiply here, you just have to add the correct number of zeros. Okay, what happens if we go the other direction? Now I'm going to go, here I went from a large unit to a small unit. Now I'm going to go from a small unit to a large one. So I'm going to start with 1,270,000 milligrams and put it over what? Over 1. Yep. I'm going to put it over 1. Okay. How can I convert this? Well, I have to get rid of milligrams, so that has to go on the bottom. I don't know how many milligrams are in a kilogram, but I do know how many milligrams are in a gram. I know that for every 1 gram, I have 1,000 milligrams. So my milligrams will cancel. Then I need to get from grams, so that has to go on the bottom, to kilograms on the top. And so I know for every 1 kilogram, there are 1,000 grams. So my grams will cancel out. And I will be left with units of kilograms now. So I'm going to take 1,270,000 and I'm going to divide it by 1,000 and divide it by 1,000 again because those numbers are on the bottom. So that will give me a final answer of 1.27 kilograms. You can type that into your calculator. What I did is basically, since I was dividing by 1,000 twice, I was going to move the decimal point 6 places to the left. Okay, you can also convert measurements that have more than 1 unit in them. And so hopefully you recognize that kilometers per hour is a speed. It can measure how fast your car is going. And so when you do this, a lot of times when it's been typewritten out, they will use a slash mark like this. However, when you write it to do the conversion, you want to make sure that you're writing not a slash mark, but you want to write it horizontally, because otherwise you're going to end up messing your conversion factors up and you won't get them in the right place. So when I write 30 kilometers per hour, I'm going to write 30 kilometers on the top, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line, and I'm going to put hours on the bottom. Okay, so make sure that you write it like this, or you're going to have a lot of difficulty knowing whether to how to arrange your other conversion factors. I'm trying to go to meters per second when I have kilometers per hour. So it doesn't really matter whether I start with kilometers or whether I start with hours. I think I'm going to start with kilometers, and I'm trying to get from kilometers to meters, and I do know how many meters there are in a kilometer. I know that in 1 kilometer there are 1,000 meters, so I can mark out the kilometers, and that's going to leave me with meters on the top, which is what I'm looking for. Now I've got to get from hours to seconds. Well, if you remember those problems we did yesterday, sometimes you got to do a couple of different steps to get from the hours to the seconds. Most people don't know how many seconds are in an hour, but they do know that in an hour there's 60 minutes. Well, where does the hour have to go? This hour is on the bottom. So to get rid of it, I have to put hours on the top, and minutes are going to go on the bottom. In 1 hour, there are 60 minutes. So this hour and this hour will now cancel out with each other. Okay? I'm supposed to get to seconds, so I'm going to have to go from minutes to seconds, and minutes is going to have to go on the top so that it will cancel. In 1 minute, there are 60 seconds, so my minutes is going to cancel out. And then when I type this into the calculator, again, you got to pay attention to what's on the top and what's on the bottom. So I'm going to start with 30. I'm going to multiply it by 1,000 because that's on the top, so times 1,000. Then I'm going to divide by 60 because that's on the bottom, so divide by 60, and then divide it again by 60. And that gives me an answer of 8.3 meters per second. Okay? All right. These last ones that we're going to do are pretty tricky. We're trying to convert square centimeters to square millimeters, and hopefully you recognize that these square units are the ones that you use when you calculate area. Now, it may seem that if I take 45 square centimeters and I put it over 1, I mean, I know how many millimeters are in a centimeter, so can I just take 1 centimeter and put 10 millimeters up here? Will that work? Well, we have a problem because this is a centimeter and this is a square centimeter. That doesn't cancel out that way. Let me show you something. If I have a box that is 1 centimeter on a side, what's the area of that square? Well, 1 times 1 is 1. So this has an area of 1 square centimeter. But how many millimeters are on a side? Well, 1 centimeter is the same as 10 millimeters. So this square is 10 millimeters this way, and it's 10 millimeters this way. 10 times 10 is 100 millimeters. So 1 square centimeter is the same as 100 square millimeters. They're not, I can't use this conversion factor because it doesn't match this over here. So generally the easiest way to convert this is, since I have centimeter times centimeter, which is centimeters squared, what I can actually do is I can just use this conversion factor twice. 10 millimeters and 1 centimeter. And since I have 2 centimeters, or I have centimeters squared up here, I have a centimeter times a centimeter down here. And so it takes both of these to cancel out this one. Okay, so then this final answer is going to be 45 times 10 times 10, which is going to be 4,500, whoops, ran out of space, square millimeters. Okay, so if you've got something squared, if this is a squared, you got to make sure you put 2 of them down here on the bottom when you're converting them. You can use the same conversion factors, but you have to make sure you use 2 of them. Okay, this one down here, I'm using cubic units. And so if I do something similar here to show you what the difference is, if I have a box, and we'll see how good I am at drawing boxes here. Okay, if I have a box, and my box is 1 meter on a side, 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, the volume of a box is the length times the width times the height. So that means that the volume of this box is 1 cubic meter, right? Well, here I'm trying to convert cubic meters to cubic centimeters. Well, how many centimeters are there in a meter? Hopefully you remember that there's 100. So this is 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. So if I take 100 times 100 times 100, I've got 100 times 100 times 100. So that's actually 1,000,000 cubic centimeters in a cubic meter. Okay? So again, don't fall into the trap that you can just use the same conversion factor that you've been using, because it won't work. So if I have 3 cubic meters and I put it over 1 and I'm converting it to centimeters, meters still goes on the bottom, centimeters still goes on the top, and in 1 meter there's 100 centimeters, but there's 3 of them up here. So that means I have to put 3 of them on the bottom. So I have to do this 2 more times, like that. Same conversion factor 3 times. So my meters cancel out with my cubic meters, and then that will give me a final answer. 3 times 100 times 100 will give me 3,000,000 cubic centimeters. Okay? All right. Again, these are a little trickier. Just make sure that you watch whether if it's squared or if it's cubed. Know that you have to use that conversion factor multiple times in order to make it work. Other tip that I reminded you of is if you're doing a speed like this, make sure that you actually make this horizontal. Don't try to leave it as a slash when you're doing your conversions, because sometimes it's hard to tell what's supposed to go on the top and what's supposed to go on the bottom, and then that could mess up whether you're multiplying or dividing. Okay, again, if you need help, make sure that you ask me, and then you're also going to get some practice doing these in the experiments that you're going to be doing the next couple of days.